Have you ever looked at a ball and thought, this would be so much better with everything in my house stuck to it? Then boy have I got the series for you. The Katamari games are the playable embodiment of what Avatar: The Last Airbender made me think happens if you drink cactus juice, and they are every bit as beautiful as they are ridiculous. Welcome to Throwback Academy, a series where I replay games from a time before loot boxes and DLC and examine them from a game design perspective. Before we get started, I just want to take a second to talk about the new BakaBaka Discord. For those of you who don't know, BakaBaka Games is my indie studio. It consists of me, my friend Justin, and my wife Shoyu Chick, who the funny and original people over on TikTok are just so very fond of. We are just chasing the dream, trying to bring shonen protagonist energy to game dev, and we wanted to create a community where game devs and game lovers alike could get together, share ideas, ask questions, and exchange the spiciest memes. So if this is something that interests you, I will leave the link down in the description. Come on down. Alright, Katamari. The series was originally created back in 2004 by game designer and artist Keita Takahashi, who has the saddest resting face I've ever seen. This is the face of a man who gave us every last ounce of happiness he had to give. Katamari Damacy was one of those games that almost didn't get made. Takahashi had never had a job in the game industry, and Namco didn't really want to hire him because he openly talked shit about their other games. Luckily, one of the people that interviewed him was able to persuade the powers that be, and Takahashi got the job. When Takahashi asked why, the guy told him, "You looked very unique, and I felt there was potential to make something fun with you." This was apparently before the game industry sucked the life out of this man. God, there's just so much sadness in his eyes. I want to give him a hug. So anyway, to make a long story short, the game was a hit, and it lives on today as a shining example that games don't have to be carbon copies of other successful games to be awesome. So someone send this video to Ubisoft and let them know they can cancel this generic dumpster fire of a game. Ubisoft is officially the hello fellow kids guy of AAA companies now. Changed my mind. Anyway, I promised you a game design perspective, and god damn it, that's what you're gonna get. I'll be talking about Katamari Damacy's sequel, We Love Katamari, because that's widely considered to be the best game in the series. So let's start by talking about the aesthetic. Katamari just oozes style and whimsy. The music is phenomenal, it's weird, it's catchy, it makes me want to frolic through a field of flowers, just listen to it. And there's a lot on offer here, from this smooth jazzy track that plays in the underwater level to whatever the hell this is. The pastel color scheme and low poly models work perfectly together to create this immediate sense that you're just here to have a good time. It's like the creators didn't try too hard to make this game, so you shouldn't try too hard while you're playing it. Just relax and have fun. Of course, this is an extremely difficult thing to pull off well, so we should all be grateful for how hard the artists work to make it seem like they didn't work hard. I mean, the sky is just a scrolling image made on MS Paint. That shouldn't work, but it does. And the simplicity of everything juxtaposed against the overwhelming and slightly arousing detail of the King of All Cosmos really does wonders to give him this imposing presence that the size alone just wouldn't have conveyed. And on that note, let's talk about the King of All Cosmos. If this guy could suck his own dick, I am positive he would. I mean, maybe he can. We know he can disconnect his head from his body, so now you too have to live with the image of this man using his own face as a fleshlight. This is the face of a man who lives in fear of what he's created. The King of All Cosmos is such an egotistical maniac that literally all it takes for him to send his son/personal hitman to decimate an entire town is a compliment. I'm not making this up. It's a frequently recurring joke that whenever someone asks the king to roll them a fat Katamari, he initially refuses, and then they tell him they love his 1970s porn stash or something, and he reconsiders. And then when you're actually in the game, if you start moving before he's done talking, he sticks around for a while to whine all over the top half of your screen. It's extremely obnoxious, and I really want to be mad at it, but I can't. It's fucking genius. Here is a character whose opinion of himself is so inflated that he literally doesn't even give a shit if you're trying to play the game. If he has something to say, he's gonna say it, and you're gonna listen, or you can go do something the fuck else. It's a risky move that makes me groan every single time it pops up, but it always brings a smile to my face in retrospect. And I think this is a fantastic lesson for anyone who wants to become a game designer. Katamari is full of weird and risky things that the game just wouldn't have been the same without. It doesn't matter how weird your ideas are. If you feel passionately about them, just commit. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, but you never know unless you try. Don't be afraid to fail. fear of failure is what has crippled the entire AAA side of the industry. Don't be like them. So anyway, the story itself is light and fun. It centers around the king of all cosmos reacting to the unexpected success of the first game, and you're mostly just going around giving the fans what they want, which for some reason is massive clusters of shit. We also occasionally get these little storyboard-esque cutscenes that give us a little bit of background on the king of all cosmos and his father, the emperor of all douchebags. Seriously, it's no wonder this guy loves himself so much. He's the only one who did. Where the story really thrives, though, isn't the cutscenes, it's in the levels themselves. More specifically, it's in the way that the items have been placed within the levels. At first glance, it just seems like a bunch of shit strewn all over the place, but when you take a second to look closer, you'll notice some things, man. Some stuff. These crabs have combined to make a crab tower. This frill-necked lizard is guarding his VHS collection. These dogs have crashed their car in this lake, but don't worry, they have snorkels. The developers placed everything in this game so deliberately and with so much love, you can really see their personalities and their wacky senses of humor in these little vignettes. Not only that, it actively engaged my imagination, and instead of just rolling around picking up stuff, I found myself creating these little narratives in my head. Let me give you an example. A fancily dressed old man wanted to build a chain of hotel bar restaurants in a nearby town, but the townsfolk wouldn't sell him the land. So he bribed the king of all cosmos with a compliment, as is customary, and the king sent me to solve the old man's problem for him. I started in a nearby home and began rolling my Katamari with purpose. I grew larger and larger still until eventually I was too large for the townspeople to ignore. I rolled through the town, a force of nature, trapping all in my path within the inescapable gravitational pull of my Katamari. I swallowed people on bikes, devoured folks waiting for the train, engorged my ever-growing cluster of pain on children at their after-school activities. But in the end, it wasn't enough. The old man told me my Katamari was far too small. "Do it again," he said. "Make it bigger." And it was then that I realized it was never about the money or the land or the hotel bar restaurants. This was about revenge. But I did get this cool crown, so worth it, I guess. My little anecdote, however ridiculous, illustrates this elusive experience that I've been searching for in games since I was a kid. I don't know if there's a word for this, but if there is, someone please let me know in the comments. So remember when you were a kid and you would play a game and then you would go to school the next day and tell your friends about the crazy thing you did last night in that game? Sure, you're far from the only person to play that game, but the experience felt wholly unique to you. And if your friend had been playing that same game, then they would come back and tell you one of their ridiculous stories, and you would laugh and joke around and spend the rest of the day eager to get home so you could play more. I never understood where that feeling came from, but I think I'm finally starting to get it. It's the things the narrative of the game doesn't explicitly say, combined with your freedom as the player to approach the gameplay how you want. I won't lie and say that We Love Katamari's gameplay gives you a ton of freedom. In fact, quite the opposite. The core gameplay loop is fairly rigid, but it more than makes up for it with the implied story. There's enough here for your mind to run away with, enough bits and pieces for you to puzzle together your own creative narrative, and in that way, We Love Katamari is kinda like Dark Souls. It's a game where you're meant to play an active role in the creation of its story. You are given the world, the lore, a few clues, and you are left entirely to your own devices. It's a fantastic experience. Now, that's not to say that games with fully fleshed out stories can't give players the same sort of thing, but I'll put it like this. The most engaged I've ever seen any sort of fandom is when they're discussing their theories for the overarching lore. People inherently want to be a part of the story, and I think that's a really important thing to take into account when you're crafting a story for anything, video games or otherwise. But enough about that. Let's talk about the gameplay. We Love Katamari is the poster child for simple mechanics executed really, really well. In each level, you're given a Katamari, which in Japanese apparently means cluster, and you are tasked with rolling your Katamari around various levels full of things that will stick to your Katamari and make it bigger. You use both analog sticks to roll the Katamari around, which is meant to simulate the placement of the prince's hands, and you can only pick up things that are smaller than you. When you're done, the king will take the Katamari and turn it into a planet, depending on how well you did. The levels are meant to be replayed, and creating a second planet will give you the option to either turn that planet into stardust or turn the last planet you made into stardust and replace it with your new planet. This led to a fantastic moment where I destroyed Frilly Lace Uranus and replaced it with Biscuit Uranus. Your ultimate goal is to create enough planets of substantial enough size to make the ultimate Katamari and roll up the sun, which I have to admit is such a compelling reason to play this game all the way through. Like, Other games task you with liberating your people or avenging the death of a loved one. We Love Katamari is just like, roll up the sun, bruh. You won't. For the most part, there is very little indication of what you can and can't pick up. You kind of just have to eyeball it. Originally, I thought maybe there should be some clearer indication, but after playing for a few hours, I actually think that guessing game is part of the fun. You walk around this charming little overworld menu, finding people who will ask you to make them a Katamari, you do as they ask, and then you do it all again. The two main game modes are as fast as possible and as big as possible, which I think explain themselves pretty well. There are different variations in different levels. For example, one level only counts the amount of flowers you roll up, but for the most part, this is the core game. Sounds simple, right? Well, apparently not, because for the whole first half of my playthrough, every time I would finish a level, everyone would shit on me for not doing a good enough job. And I realized this is a world full of people with extremely high expectations. Making a Katamari that slakes these people's thirst for oneness is not easy. Eventually, I started to identify a trick for rolling up the fattest fatties. Don't stop rolling. Katamari is all about momentum. Don't stop to suck up that extra button. Don't dwell on that crab that is too large. Roll on. Find other things you can suck up, then do another loop and get the things you missed. It's best to think of the Katamari as a slice of bread and the world around you as egg yolk. You couldn't possibly get all the egg yolk in one go, could you? And even if you could, would you really want to? Would you really want bread so soggy? Not I. I'm a man of firm toast, and apparently, firmer Katamari. This run where I cracked the Katamari code was also the first run where a shooting star graced my sky. Apparently this is the highest Katamari honor the King of all Cosmos can bestow upon you. It's also another item to add to your cosmic Katamari in the endgame. Come on, everybody! At the time of writing this, I still haven't beaten We Love Katamari, but I'm going to, and I don't think that's something you'll hear me say a lot on this series. There just isn't enough time in the world for me to play all these games to completion and make videos about them without making this my full-time job. But Katamari, on top of only being a handful of hours long, is worth the time investment. Sure, it can definitely get repetitive, but it's fun, and played in small bursts, it's consistently refreshing. There's just nothing else like it in the world, nothing that it didn't directly inspire at least, and I think it's an extremely important game for aspiring designers to study. It shows that you don't need a multi-million-dollar budget or cutting-edge graphics or a million different systems to make a good game. You just need a solid core mechanic, a unique personality, and the intestinal fortitude to try something different. I talk a ton of shit about the AAA side of the industry, and that's not going to stop anytime soon. They deserve it. The main purpose of game design is to give the players an experience they can't get anywhere else, and AAA companies just don't care about that anymore. They care about sure things, cookie-cutter games that they know will sell. Nowadays, a company as big as Namco was back then would never make something like Katamari. It's too bold, too terrifying, too niche. But an indie dev would, and indie devs have. There are tons of unique and incredible games out there if only you're willing to look. So I think there's a lot of hope for the future of the industry. And I think the more people that get into game dev, the more likely that future becomes. So if you've been thinking about it, just go for it. And I'm sure there are a few people who are going to watch this video and say, well, I'm not creative enough to come up with something like that, so I won't bother. And to them I'd like to say, you don't have to reinvent the wheel to create a masterpiece. Celeste sure didn't, and neither did Hollow Knight, and those are two of my favorite games of all time. The key to making a good game is passion. If you care, if you study, if you allow yourself to try and fail and try again, eventually you'll make a game that means something to someone. And at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. Alrighty, that's it for me. So if you liked what you saw, hit that subscribe button, offer a like to the almighty algorithm, and feel free to let me know down in the comments what kind of content you want to see in the future. I'm still sort of feeling out this whole YouTube thing, so ideas would be greatly appreciated. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.